Hello, thank you for joining Helaman's Army today. Today, we're going to continue on in the Consecration versus Communism discussion, and we will be, I will be discussing Lorenzo Snow today with his contribution or his thoughts or his take on the law of consecration. And he actually says something about communism today. So specifically uses the word communism. And so that is, that's actually a first. So I know that we've talked about Joseph Smith was the first one to mention socialism. Brigham Young mentioned socialism a few times. John Taylor, if you haven't watched the John Taylor video, it has about half as many views as the Wilford Woodruff video. So if you haven't had a chance to watch the John Taylor video, give that one a look, because it's got history in it concerning concerning socialism, and it's socialism in the United States, and how it's very interesting the way it ties in. And then, of course, Wilford Woodruff, he was actually fairly neutral on the subject, but in the video I did on him, but we see that he actually lived the United Order. So I want to make before I dive into Lorenzo Snow, I want to just make the statement, the comparison, the observation that Lorenzo Snow talks specifically about the United Order. He talks solely about the United Order. He doesn't necessarily talk much about the law of consecration specifically. He talks specifically about the law of order, or sorry, the United Order. So as I had mentioned in one of my previous videos, I believe that there is a line between the United Order and the law of consecration. That being that the law of consecration, if you put it in a Venn diagram, the law of consecration would be inside of the United Order. The United Order is dependent upon the law of consecration in order to function, but the United Order would be completed on the ward level, as opposed to a personal level, where the law of consecration can be completed, I believe. So, and the more I dive into this and the further I get, the more I believe that. But I just want to make that clear at the beginning of this video, because if you were to just read through all of Lorenzo Snow's statements, you'll think, oh man, this is the folklore that we all hear, that one day we're all going to go out and live the United Order again, and we have to get ready. Maybe, but I just want to make it clear that this is how he talks. And if you recall in the Brigham Young video, how Brigham Young is very clear about how no matter how hard we try, we can the equality of temporal things is near impossible, and inequality meaning dollar for dollar equality. So there's a difference. Matter of fact, I didn't prepare for this, but we're going to look this up. Equality definition. Oh, if I can spell it. Definition. I'm an engineer. We don't know how to spell. Okay, so this is when we are talking about the equality of the law of consecration, or the equality of the United Order. This is exactly what I think. The standard of something as measured against other things of a similar kind, the degree of excellence of something, an improvement in product quality. Equality. So when we're equal, I left the off. I'm an engineer. I don't know how, but that's one of them. Equality and quality. The state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. That's what I believe equality means in the law of consecration, and not anything else. Oops. So when we're talking about equality, and equality of temporal things, I don't think it's not dollar for dollar. You can't achieve dollar for dollar in temporal things. We can have an equality of stewardship. We can have an equality of opportunity. But let's say, and we'll use the Newell K. Whitney store as an example. Newell K. Whitney consecrates all of his property to the church in the United Order, and he's given back the mercantile and all his property as his stewardship. So he got back what he put in. Now, if we gave somebody else the mercantile instead of Newell K. Whitney, somebody who had no experience in running the mercantile, somebody who didn't know what it took to run the mercantile, somebody who had no idea who the contacts were in order to get more products shipped in, the mercantile would have had a very difficult time staying open. So to me, it's one of the merciful things that God will do is give us a stewardship that we are comfortable with and that we can excel within. Sometimes we're given a stewardship that pushes us a little hard, and we end up having to learn a lot along the way. That's happened to me a few times, and it happens to everyone who becomes a parent when your first child. But so when we're talking about the United Order with Lorenzo Snow, just keep that in mind. That we're talking about equality and quality. I think I accidentally looked up quality as opposed to equality because I'm an engineer and I can't spell. So equality and quality have very similar meanings, but equality, this idea that we have equal opportunities, that we're equal in stature, equal in the abilities. So our stewardship gives us this opportunity. And so as we read through Lorenzo Snow, just keep that in mind, because if you were to read this with the social conditioning which we receive constantly, I mean, if you turn on the news or the whatever, if you turn on the social media and just go for whatever people are saying, that social conditioning just comes in and just takes over, and then you think everything equal means dollar for dollar, and that's not the actual meaning. That's the mathematical meaning. 1 equals 1, 2 equals 2, but that is not the equality meaning. Okay, so I'm actually going to cover 4 Journal of Discourses talks, and I'm already in 7.5 minutes, so I'm going to try to go through this fairly quick. I'm not going to read much, I don't believe so. I'm just going to give a quick overview, and there's a few parts that I've highlighted that I'll discuss more specifically, but just a quick overview. This one is actually interesting. He talks about the unity of the saints. We need to be unified together. And then he talks about how we're dependent on Christ and each other. We are dependent upon Jesus Christ for everything. Everything belongs to God. We're dependent upon God. Everything we have is from God. And it's very important that we are living the gospel and the commandments. He does make a statement in here about I have a section that I've highlighted, so I don't want to highlight stuff here because I'll lose it. He says, in order to accomplish the gathering of Israel out of Egyptian bondage, there had to be something done to liberate them from their thraldom, and this something had to be done by a higher power, by an individual that had more wisdom, more intelligence, more understanding, and more power and means within his hands for purpose of securing those blessings which they needed. They never could have got out of their difficulties nor from their bondage unless this power had been exerted by one who had more intelligence, more knowledge, more information in relation to the means of their deliverance. So I think this is interesting because it ties into the faith and works conversation, which, God has faith too. And he also has works. And so our goal is to emulate God. So faith and works go hand in hand. And then he recalls the conversation that Jesus Christ has with Peter, saying, "Hey, do you love me?" He said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Feed my sheep." So this also ties into the law of consecration. Anything from the Wilford Woodruff video, anything that you have that's good should be shared. Anything that you receive that is of good value should be shared. This is the gospel of Jesus Christ. If you love Jesus Christ, share the gospel. That is part of the law of consecration, is sharing the gospel. And then he goes on to talk about how we think of improving ourselves. This is a really good point. So I'm going to actually read this small paragraph where it says, "But let him." So, but let him take the opposite course and think of improving his own dear self, and that there is only himself to be saved, and that all he has to accomplish to secure life and salvation for himself, and only to think of his own sins and to reform himself and to take care of himself. A man who takes this course is going upon a principle that will always keep him bound up and contracted in his feelings and contracted in his views, and will never accomplish the thing that is desired. So this is exactly the entire purpose of the law of consecration, is to help bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of man. And if we are so focused in on ourselves, if we're so focused in on, I got to take care of my own sins and my own things and my own issues, without reaching out and helping others, then we've completely misunderstood the gospel of Jesus Christ and the law of consecration in subsequent form. This one is actually interesting as well. He talks about, and again, sharing the gospel. The more knowledge you gain, that you need to share it. So let a man remember that there are others that are in darkness and that have not advanced so far in knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence. And let him depart that knowledge, intelligence, and power unto his friends and brethren, inasmuch as he is farther advanced than they are. And by so doing, he will soon discover that his mind will expand, and that light and knowledge which he had gained would increase and multiply more rapidly. This is neat. This is awesome. So God has given you this gift of knowledge or of wisdom, and he says, hey, if you go share that with other people, you will increase more rapidly. And my hope, my prayer, my great desire is that in making these videos and sharing these with other people online and sharing what I'm learning, helps you to understand the law of consecration. And I hope that I am able to then gather more to share more. And so wouldn't that be great? I'm excited. So that's, share what you know. Find somebody to share what you know personally, or if you want, like, make a video. Matter of fact, I really would like to start sharing people's testimonies again. I really want to get back into that. I really loved that. I enjoyed it. It was very spiritually uplifting for me. It's also very, very difficult to get people on. I've had a couple of people I've been talking to for a while, and we just seem to keep missing each other. But share what you can. That's the goal. Oh, and if you want to share your testimony with me, give me send me an email at helaman'sarmy@protonmail.com. Okay, so then he goes on to talk about, boy, he talks about a lot in this. This is actually a very lengthy talk, so I'm trying to just make it super, sum it up so that you guys can read through it on your own. And I apparently missed the part that I had highlighted, so because I highlighted something else. So let me see if I can find where it was at. Okay, I think this is it right here. Now, an individual, in order to secure the highest and greatest blessing to himself, in order to secure the approbation of the Almighty, and in order to continually improve in the things pertaining to righteousness, he must do all things to the best advantage. Let him go to work and be willing to sacrifice for the benefit of his friends. If he wants to build himself up, the best principle he can do it upon is to build up his friends. This is the same principle I wish to refer to your minds in relation to the Master, who wished to make himself perfect in those sciences which he had partially studied, and he did it by communicating to his scholars that information which he had obtained, and did it again and again, and by teaching them he improved himself. You brethren that are going forward in any undertaking and want to get rich, and that want to make large farms, to get many wives, to extend your household and your popularity, to make up your minds to make your wives comfortable, to feed and clothe your children, and do those things which are required of you, But while you are engaged in this, let your minds be expanded to comprehend and look after the interest of your friends that are around you, and where it is in your power to secure benefits to you friends, to do so. And in so doing, you will find that those things which you need will come into your hands quicker than if you labor entirely to secure them to yourselves, independent of regarding the interests of your friends. I know this is a good and important principle. And so that's the entire basis of the law of conservation. The more we help, law of consecration, the more we help each other, the more it comes back to us. So this is very long, very, very long discourse. I will leave a link to this discourse in the description, in the video description. Okay, so this next one, the filial duty, consecration, etc. So I actually do have quite a bit to talk about in here. I may have missed something. Let me check. I may have missed something in the fourth one. Nope, it's in this one. It's in volume 19, not volume 4. It's in the next one we're going to talk about. See, Lorenzo Snow did so much. It's all kind of like, it's all starting to kind of mix in my head. So I'm trying to keep it straight. So this one's actually fairly short, but I'm going to just focus on these little paragraphs right here that are highlighted. They go down for a little bit on the screen there. So, you brethren that are here in these valleys have a certain privilege which you ought to appreciate, namely that of consecrating your property to the Lord. If you want to know the secret principle upon which you may become rich, it lies in contributing your means and putting your property into the hands of the leaders of this church. When a man has property, he is very apt to fix his heart upon it. Some have $1,000 worth of property, some have $5,000, and some more. I fear that many are using their means in a way that will prove a curse instead of a blessing. And when the Lord says, "Give me your property," we are not unanimously ready to answer the call. In this respect, however, we are beginning to learn, and in some degree answering the call, we are beginning to learn that it all belongs to the Lord, and that He has given us a little power by which we have acquired some knowledge of His will and designs concerning us. Take the man who has a large share of this world's goods and examine what kind of a man he is. Try his spirit, and you will generally find that it is often one of the greatest trials that can come upon him to be called upon to part with any of his property. And so I think I'm pausing away from there. I think that's a very important point to make, is that the more we gather around us, the harder it is to let a little bit go. And we have to let things go in order for things to keep coming back. Otherwise, it turns into a selfish situation. So if you please, you may contrast such a person with these boys who have been addressing you, and you will find them ready and on hand to do anything that may be required at their hands. Those youth are more willing and pliable in the hands of the servants of God than many men who have been in the church from the beginning. Lately, however, you have learned the principle to some extent, and the power of God has been manifested, so that you are now ready to give a little of your means for the building up of the kingdom of God, and by, I presume, you will progress like some others have done, and be ready to put all upon the altar. So I think this is interesting, and to be ready to put all upon the altar. I don't have this. Yeah, I just highlighted all that. I don't have this talk pulled up, but eventually we're going to get to Dieter Uchtdorf, Elder Uchtdorf, and he mentions specifically about leaving things upon the altar. He's talking about the difference between sacrifice and consecration, and he says that sacrificing something means that we leave it upon the altar. You're going to sacrifice your sin. You're going to leave it upon the altar of God. You're going to sacrifice something that's not good for you. You're going to leave it upon the altar of God. But when you consecrate something, you're going to say, this is still useful, and I'm going to give it to you, God, and you can use it however you want. And that's really the difference between sacrifice and consecration. So I think it's interesting to go back in time and see Lorenzo Snow saying something like, put it upon the altar, because to me that, based on Elder Uchtdorf's talk, that that implies sacrifice to me now. So just something to ponder. So take this people at the present time, consider what they possess, then inquire how many of them have consecrated their property, and you will find that the amount consecrated is a mere nothing compared to that which the people actually possesses. I tell you, brethren, that although this may seem a small matter, yet if we cling to the property that we possess as the wicked do to theirs, we shall never obtain that which we are trying for. We must learn to obey the word of the Lord. Why is it that we do not talk more about consecration? It is because Brother Brigham does not care anything about it, only that he wishes the people to take course to secure themselves against the evil one, that he may not gain control of them or their families. And I think that's a good question. We don't talk about consecration much in the church, and at least locally. And we'll find as we go on, because I've been doing some looking ahead, searching ahead as part of this. And we'll find that if we start looking at consecration today, that there's a message that's being taught about consecration that doesn't seem to be sinking in, but it's being taught, very clearly being taught. Maybe it's sinking into some people here and there, but so many of us are so focused on this temporal aspect of consecration that we are missing the real, true value of consecration. So the rest of this really is all about just consecrating your property. So I don't think I need to just read that to you, but this was an example where this is all about the United Order. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, Lorenzo Snow was all about the United Order, didn't really talk much about the law of consecration. But I think he asked a couple of really good questions. Why is it that we're not talking more about the law of consecration? So also, just something that came to mind, the Doctrine and Covenants teaches us that the same social structure that exists here now will exist in the eternities, in the heavens. And so, I'm really, I'm a little hard pressed to comment on the success or the not so much success of those who are in the celestial kingdom, because I don't know. And I don't know if there's going to be a big, difference. But I know that in order to build upon a kingdom, and in order to continually improve and to grow and to be better, that you've got to that it takes effort. And I don't believe that that's going to change. It's going to take effort no matter what. And there's just so many things that kind of just blow my mind when I start to think about that. But and that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother video. So I'm not gonna dive into that here. But really, it's important that we are willing to just let things go and give those properties, whatever it might be, to God if needed, to consecrate as needed. Okay, so this next one. I'll read through this first, and then we're gonna do a video in the video. It'll be the first time I've done this. I think I got it worked out, but we're gonna try it. If it doesn't work, I'll have to edit the video. I don't think I'll have to. So it is argued by some that when the principle of tithing came in, it superseded the principles of the United Order. See, now this is interesting, because this is what people say all the time. Oh, well, we're told that we need to live the law of tithing right now because we can't live the law of consecration. Now, keep in mind that Lorenzo Snow is talking about the United Order. That is, I have not raised my hand or committed to the law, to the United Order. But the law of consecration, that's a different story, right? So it is argued by some that when the principle of tithing came in, it superseded the principles of the United Order. The law of Moses was given to be a schoolmaster, to bring the people to a knowledge of the Son of God and induce them to obey the principles of the fullness of the gospel. The higher law was given to the children of Israel when they were first delivered from Egyptian bondage. But in consequence of their disobedience, the gospel in its fullness was withdrawn, and the law of carnal commandments was added. Now, do you imagine that there would have been any wrong if the people wanted to find the principles of the higher law and obey them as near as circumstances would admit? Do you suppose it would have been wrong to search out the fullness of the gospel while living under the Mosaic law? But in the Book of Mormon, we find this point more fully illustrated. We find that the inhabitants of this continent had a knowledge of the fullness of the everlasting gospel, and were baptized for the remission of sins many generations before Jesus came into the world. And we find that Alma was baptized in the waters of Mormon, and some 450 other individuals. Alma, by his energy and perseverance, had discovered the fullness of the gospel and obtained revelations from the Lord and the privilege of observing the gospel in all its fullness and blessings. Do you think the Lord was angry with them? They were under the Mosaic law, yet considered it a blessing to observe the higher law. Hopefully you guys see where I'm going with this. So now I will say, in regard to the matter of tithing, I think the law was given to the Latter-day Saints, one object being to prepare them for and conduct them to the United Order, that they might not fall into the same error as the people who were driven from the state of Missouri, but gradually be inducted into those higher principles. Okay, so again, keep in mind, Lorenzo Snow is hyper-focused on the United Order, and I'm focused on the law of consecration. So, the law of tithing, some call it a lesser law. I believe that the law of tithing is a very big foundation stone within the law of consecration. That the law of tithing is a requirement to meet the law of consecration. Law of tithing, law of consecration. I believe that it has to be met in order it's within inside the law of consecration, and it's a big part. Now, if you look at the church today, it's doing very, very well with tithing and with fast offerings, and it's doing extremely well, to the point where we probably could go for quite a while. If people stopped paying their tithing, the church could probably be self-sustaining for quite a while. I don't know how long it could last, but I know with the amount of money that the church has on hand that we could probably do pretty well. So we're doing pretty good with the law of tithing. And some would say, well, we could do so much better with the law of consecration. And you're right, but I think there's a big difference in maintaining and managing the facilities of the church and maintaining the church versus the purpose of the law of consecration is to look after the poor and the needy. But I think it's all kind of tied together, but we're getting there. So this video is actually Elder David A. Bednar, and I will leave a link to the video. You can watch the whole video on YouTube. I'll leave a link in the description video, or in the description here. So let's watch it.
So in all of these instances, sequence is very instructive. The sequence of the covenants in the temple is instructive. Sacrifice is a lesser law preparation. It's not a lesser law, but I mean a preparatory law, lesser law administered in the authority of the Aaronic priesthood. Consecration is the culmination. In a similar kind of way, there's a sequence. Humility is dependence upon God and acknowledging that. And we read in the scriptures about people who are compelled to be humble because of their poverty. In the same way that consecration is a capstone and encompasses sacrifice, meekness is a capstone and encompasses humility. It is possible to be humble but not be very far along on the pathway to meekness. But if one is meek, you have to be humble. So there's a sequence and a relationship to these things. And the Savior, if you find all the places where he describes himself, not in every instance, but in many of them, meekness is always first. So as I looked for those sequences as I'm studying the scriptures, I said, why is that one first? So that's why I have gravitated to that. If you think about what Joseph said, we can't exercise faith in him unless we have a correct understanding of his nature, attributes, and character. And he seems to place a pretty high priority on that one. I don't know that there's a predictable, necessary sequence. I think it comes line upon line, precept upon precept. In the same way that I'm not sure we understand consecration until we first understand sacrifice. I think there's a series of attributes that we have to both learn about and gain experience with before we begin to really appreciate and understand, with the help of the Spirit, what meekness is.
Did you catch all that? So he's talking in this entire meeting, he's talking about meekness of Jesus Christ. He's talking about the meekness, but he uses different examples. You cannot be humble until you can be humble and not meek, but you cannot be meek without being humble. The same would go for tithing and the law of consecration, as discussed in Discourse, Volume 19, verse 48, or Discourse 48. You can live the law of tithing, but not be living the law of consecration. But you cannot live the law of consecration without living the law of tithing. It is an absolute necessity of the law of consecration. And I don't have it pulled up. I should have pulled it up. Doctrine and Covenants, section 85, verse, I think it's verse 3, where he's talking about, and this is the verse that I had to like pause in video number 1 and 2. I had to pause and stop and think about it, because he's talking about what happens to people if they apostatize, and the people, and so it's before and right into the middle of verse 3, and then after verse 3 that's what he's talking about. But right smack dab in the middle of verse 3, there's a little statement that kind of is a culmination. It's a microcosm of the law of consecration, and he says something along the lines of, that I may tithe my people, right in the middle of it. And so tithing is absolutely necessary in the law of consecration. And we have to be living it. Now there's one other part in this this particular talk that I'm gonna go over, and then we're gonna move on, because I don't want to. I've already taken up way too much time. This is the very first time that we see a man who, at the time, he's not the president of the church. He's not the prophet. He is an apostle. But this is the first time we see this from one of the brethren. The United Order is not French communism. He's very straight about it. He's very forward about it. It's very straight. It's very straightforward. This is pretty plain English. And if you go through and listen to all of Lorenzo Snow's talks, or read through all of Lorenzo Snow's talks on the United Order, you'll kind of get this, like, if you're going with the social conditioning, which we all have, you'll get this impression that this is communism, but it's not. It is not communism. And it's made very, he makes it very clear right here. There's a statement: the United Order is not French communism. And back then, French communism was the communism. The German communism that Marx put together, I don't know what year this was given, and I'm not on the right website to give me the details on the year. If you go to Wikisource, as opposed to journalofdiscourses.com, it gives you all the information about the year and where it was given and all that. But this statement, it's not until the 1850s that we get the Karl Marx starting to do his deal, and I'm currently reading a book about that. So I've been sticking with Latter-day Saint sources, and that'll be pretty much for most of this video series. That's what this is going to be, is Latter-day Saint sources. But I believe in order to understand the appeal of communism, I think I have to reach outside of Latter-day Saint sources, because we don't talk about the appeal of satanic stuff like communism. So there will be at least one video talking about the appeal of communism and why people want to do it. There's been mention of it before. Oh, maybe I just haven't gotten to it. See, it's all starting to come together. It's all like starting to mix in my head. Hugh B. Brown talks about it a little bit, which we'll get to. All right, Lorenzo Snow and the Principles of the United Order. So this is the last one I'm going to talk about. So these two, he opens up by just reading Volume 19, Discourse 48, and Volume 20, Discourse 47. He opens up by just directly reading out of the Doctrine and Covenants. Now this one, he keeps referencing the Doctrine and Covenants. And I'm just going to give you a quick narrative. This one's not as long as the last one was, but the narrative is still there. And I highlighted something in here for you, but I forgot what it was. So, I clicked on it something, so it's gone. We'll figure it out as we go. Again, he said, hey, we have this relationship with God that we have to rely on him to be sustained. He says that the demands are not of a nature that have no parallel in the history of the people of God. Basically, he's saying, look, this has been done before. We're not the first people that are told to do this. Enoch, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, the people that were led out of Egypt, the apostles. He goes and he talks about all these people that have been required to live this law. And then he has the conversation about the rich man that comes and talks to Jesus Christ and says, hey, I want to follow you. What should I do? And he says, go sell all your stuff. So he has a conversation about that. Says, sell all your stuff and give it to the poor and follow him. And he didn't do it because he loved his money more than he loved Jesus Christ. Oh golly. So here's a part what I think is very interesting. This is a very long paragraph, and I'm not gonna read through all this for you. There's a link in the description if you want to read this one. Give it a read. It's a really good discourse. So he's talking about Doctrine and Covenants. So in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord said to Martin Harris, impart a portion of thy property, yea, even part of thy lands, and all save the support of thy family. This revelation applied simply to Martin Harris and not to everybody, only as you consider it an example to Latter-day Saints. But on page 161, and the Doctrine and Covenants have been reorganized since then, so 161 is not where it's still at. And I didn't look it up before I started this video, so I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Book of Doctrine and Covenants, there is a general commandment in connection with the divine law which was given in this revelation. So it's the same revelation where he tells Martin Harris to impart a portion of his property. It applies to everybody as, for instance, thou shalt not lie is a general commandment and applicable to every Latter-day Saint. Here is the commandment, verse 55. And if thou obtainest more than that which would be for thy support, thou shalt give it into my storehouse, that all things may be done according to that which I have said. Okay. So I think that's really just the crux. That's the summation of the law of consecration, is that if you have more than you should need for your support, then give it into a storehouse. And in the future, I'll go through law of consecration in our day and how I view it. And I could be wrong on some of this, admittedly. But as I put that video together and as I put that framework together, I'm going to put together things that we need to be concerned about, such that we're not having to go to the storehouse, so that we are self-sufficient. And then at that point, we can really give to the storehouse. So I'm going to, I'll do that video later on. But but I think this is a very important point, is that if you obtain more than you would need for your support, give it to the storehouse. And then there's examples that go on who gets their stewardships. Yeah, and it's interesting because there were some elders that were given a steward over temporal things, and there were some elders that were given a stewardship over the revelations, which I think is interesting. So but that was the first implication to me, that if you're given a stewardship over a revelation, then by the law of consecration means that you're sharing that. That if you're given that stewardship, it's your job to share it. And as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have that stewardship over these revelations that we've been given, over the Book of Mormon, over the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price. And it dawned on me just recently, we get these NPC folks that come in, and when I say NPC, I mean non-playable character. If you're not familiar with the NPC meme, go look it up. NPC. These folks that seem to be programmed, they come in and they're like, oh, Galatians 1:8, and then they feel like they've slam dunked the Latter-day Saints. And you can open the Book of Mormon and very clearly find that it's not another gospel. It is the same gospel in another book. There's a difference. There's a huge difference between a different gospel and a different book. So Revelation chapter 14, verse 6 also says that there will be an angel from heaven carrying the everlasting gospel. And as I thought about this Revelation chapter 14, verse 6 verse, it seems insane that the angel would come out with the Bible, the book that we already have, the book that all the world already has, and share that. Like, why would God need to send an angel with the fullness of the everlasting gospel in the same book? We already have it. God, why would he do that? There must needs be revelation in order to get that. So, just an observation, just something to think about. And he does. Okay, back to this talk. I'm taking up too much of your time, so we're going to make this, hopefully wrap this up here fairly quick. And so as far as the law of tithing is concerned, there is something about it that is not of the same nature and character as the law of the United Order. Keep in mind, he was hyper-focused on the United Order. We're focused on the law of consecration. And there's a slight difference between the two. It was added because the people were not willing to comply with this noble and high celestial law, whereby they could act according to the light that is in them and the power of the Almighty, which that should be inspired. So this is the first time I ever see anything, and I think this is where all the folklore comes from, is this statement right here. I think this is where well, we couldn't live the United Order, so therefore we have to live the law of tithing. I think that's where this comes from. And so we go from this United Order, and we skip law of consecration, go straight to tithing. It's silly to me. It is really silly to me. But we can live the law of consecration. The more I study this, the more I'm convinced we can live the law of consecration. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the temple saying, yeah, I'll live the law of consecration. It doesn't make any sense. So, as far as the law of tithing is concerned, there's something that is not of the same nature and character as the law of the United Order. And that's true. So, he's quoting from the Doctrine and Covenants again. And then he talks about the law of tithing. So the law of tithing is, and the reason that he talks about why it's not the same nature. And he talks about it in this paragraph here, and I'm not going to read it, I'll just summarize it. Basically that those who are poor and those who are rich pay 10%. So if you think about the widow's mite, she walks up, she has a mite, she throws it in. That's all she had, because she couldn't have any less. That was the minimum amount of money you can have. That's like saying, hey, I had a penny, I paid it to the bishop, and now I have nothing. Whereas the rich person who has, say, millions of dollars and pays, let's say they have 10 million and they pay 10% of that. That would be what, 100,000? Or if they have 100 million, they pay 1 million. That's probably an easier connection. If you have 100 million, you pay 1 million, right? So, and then they have $99 million left over. Well, that's a huge difference between the widow's mite, having nothing left over, and the rich man having $99 million left over. It's a huge difference. So no, it's not of the same nature. But the law of consecration would encourage the Spirit talking to the rich man, would say, hey, you need to give You need to give more than $1 million, and that needs to go to the poor and the needy, right? And that's the, you know what, this whole thing, it all ties into the Mosiah chapter 2, verse 2:17 or 3:17. Behold, I tell you these things that you may learn wisdom, that you may learn that when you're in the service of your fellow beings, you're only in the service of your God. It ties into that as well. I probably have the reference wrong, and someone's going to correct me, and that's fine. Correct me. It's all right. It's fine. So, yeah, he goes basically on to say that I cannot believe that the Latter-day Saint is justified in ignoring this higher law. For we have read that, behold, none are exempt from this law who belong to the church of the living God. So, the law of consecration, it's difficult to live. I know it's difficult to live, and there have been times in my life where I believe I've lived it. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and find something at the same time. It's a bad idea. But there have been times where I know that I probably haven't been doing very well. And so it's a matter of the feed my sheep. And, you know, the more I think about the feed my sheep thing, the more I realize it's not just... I just realized that you can't see the very bottom of this screen here, so I'm going to see if I can make it so it's not crazy, so you can see the bottom here. Okay. So he's talking about the feed my sheep, and that's in this last paragraph. He's talking about this, and he basically is just saying, go preach the gospel, and that's part of the law of consecration, which I've already said. But feed my sheep implies multiple things. It's just kind of like the temple. There's multiple symbols, and with each symbol points to multiple things, and it's layers. There's symbols upon symbols, and there's meaning upon meaning. And that would be the same with feed my sheep. Food, yes. Feed the poor and the needy. Gospel, yes. Feed the poor and the needy. Share what you know, yes. Feed the poor and the needy. Help people to be self-sufficient, yes. Feed the poor and the needy. Feed my sheep. Pretty much everything that you have excelled at in life, the more we share and help others, the better off we'll be. And if you're a parent, if you have children, you will know that it is the quintessential everything of living the law of consecration. All of a sudden, you and your spouse are joined together, and you have this little person that came from who knows where, but they're a little person, and everything that you have belongs to them, and you'll give it all up for them. And every parent knows that feeling, or at least should know that feeling, that you would everything your child needs, you're going to take care of it. And that's really the whole concept, is that we need to be feeding the flock. And so if we treat each other in this way, where we're willing to help you in any way possible, then we're feeding the sheep. And this is the message that I will leave today with you. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.